We are living in a world where human connection is being forgotten, where everybody's talking, but not enough people are listening. And we're speaking, but we're not necessarily communicating. And so the revolution that I'm inviting into in this episode, in my work, is what if there is a way for us to communicate that paves the way for deep intimacy, deep connection, deep fulfillment, and evolution, not just of the self, but of the collective. Because when we learn how to connect with ourselves, connect with each other, and as a result, we get to connect to God, source, universe, who we become are people who are connected to our heart, and we can express our truth from a loving place. Welcome to It's Not What You Think, the podcast that takes you on a transformative journey to rewrite your story of greatness and reawaken your soul's purpose. I'm your host, Celinne DaCosta, a subconscious mind expert, master coach, and believer in the limitless power and magic that lives within all of us. My intention in this podcast is to propel you into your next level of success so that you are free to create the life that your heart most desires. Through deep, actionable insights, personal stories, and world-class guests, I'll provide you with the tools, strategies, and resources you need to unlock the fullest expression of who you're meant to be in this lifetime so that you can consciously design a reality that is beyond what you could have ever dreamed of. Join me on this journey to personal growth and evolution, and let's live our lives in accordance with our highest soul's calling. This podcast is your weekly check-in to help this path become more simple, obtainable, and fun. Thank you for tuning in today, and now let's dive in. Hello, familia. Welcome back to another episode of It's Not What You Think. Today, we're diving into the human connection crisis. Why we're all talking, but nobody's listening. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling completely misunderstood, even though you've used all the right words? Or watched a relationship slowly unravel despite everyone's best intention? I know I've had my fair share of those moments, and I can bring it back to being a little girl and watching my parents fight every single day in the house. Every single day, there was a new fight about a new thing, a new problem that was happening. And I remember just as being a very empathic, sensitive child, just thinking to myself, gosh, if these people love each other, if they say I love you to each other, how is it possible that they also yell at each other and say such mean things to one another? And how is it possible that they just don't understand each other? You know? And I grew up with that, having been in a household where I watched my mother and my stepfather fight every single day. But not only that, where even when my stepfather walked out on us when I was 14, it transferred to me, right? Just having every single day, having a fight with my mother, and just being in Latin culture. Not to say, I'm not saying Latins are fighters, but there's that element of fire and spiciness that can happen. And just thinking to myself, okay, there's gotta be a better way because this is so unpleasant. And ever since I was a little girl, because of my own life experiences, because of not just my own life at home, but watching other people around me constantly misunderstand each other, even though they quote unquote loved each other, I've been haunted by a question. Why are we all so terrible at talking to each other? And it's funny because this question that's haunted me, it became a gift because I became obsessed with communication, human psychology, and understanding why people are the way they are and why we act out the way that we do. And this led me into an entire rabbit hole, of studying communication when I was in college to really understand the art of communicating. Like, why do people communicate? How do we interact with pop culture? How do we interact with the digital world? And then, coming off of that, going into corporate in New York City and studying advertising, human psychology, consumer psychology. Why do we buy the things that we buy? Like, what does it take for us to say yes to a purchase, for us to say, I want this thing? And then that started to evolve as I began my work with helping and, supporting leaders to tell their story. It opened up a whole other rabbit hole of, okay, what is the story that you've been telling yourself? Why is it that you feel shame or guilt around talking about your past? Why is it that you're not communicating what you really, really want to say? Why are you filtering yourself through social media, through, when you're on a stage as a leader? Why are we filtering ourselves so freaking much? Okay. And the answers, as I begin to look for ask the questions, I also began to find the answers. And this is what we're going to explore and unpack today. Just a disclaimer, this is a huge topic, and I can and do teach entire programs when it comes to the art of communication and how can we really engage in embodied heart-led communication. But today's episode is really for those of you who, if you're not familiar with this topic or you haven't given it much thought, or you're struggling with it and you're like, what do I do? Where do I start? Then let's dive in, because it's an important conversation that we need to have, because this is a problem that, from my observation, is very universal. And the conversation I want to have today is not just about having better conversations. It's about the fundamental human need for connection that's being lost in our modern world. So I'm going to ask you to just take a moment now and think about times in your life where you're trying really hard to connect with somebody that you love, or to get something through to them, like get a message through them, and they just couldn't hear you. You couldn't find the time. You just couldn't be present enough. I actually, I'm so passionate about this that I did a TEDx talk on this a few years ago. It's called an unconventional approach to human connection. And in this talk, the big idea of my TED talk was that connection is not created through time. It's created through presence, but through quality of presence. What that means is that it's not about how much time you spent with somebody, like how much face time you have with someone. That's not really the primary determining factor of the quality of your connection, but it's rather about how, in the context of that time, how present were you? What is the level of presence that you carry within that connection? That's going to determine the depth of the connection more than the amount of times clocked in. The classic example of this is, knowing somebody, for living with someone for years, whether it's your family member or your partner, spending so much time, with someone else. And then they do something and you think to yourself, gosh, I feel like I don't even know this person. I can't believe they did that. Or why didn't they tell me what's going on? Have you ever had that feeling where you thought you knew somebody just by the virtue of the amount of time you've known them for? Like childhood friends is another great example. And then they just feel like a stranger. So if the amount of time or the amount of conversations that you've had with somebody, that's not a solid measuring stick for the depth of connection that you have with them. What is a solid measuring stick is the amount of moments you've spent with them in deep presence. And so the first part that I want to address today is my observation is that there is a communication crisis going on right now in our world. And I don't say that from like let's all panic and get into our, our survival nervous system state. No. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom here. I'm sharing this because I do believe there's a way out and through. And that's what I'm going to be reflecting on today. And at the same time, we need to recognize some realities that make up the fabric of the modern world these days. Because what I have seen is that our modern life has eroded our capacity for meaningful dialogue with each other. And before I share the ways that I've seen that happen, it feels important for us to get on the same page when I'm speaking into communication and when I am speaking about meaningful dialogue, basically, as I'm talking to you about communication and miscommunication, let's just get on the same page on how I'm defining that. So, communication, when I refer to it, I am not only referring to speaking. Speaking is not communication, just like communication is not necessarily just speaking. When I speak about communication, what I'm referring to is communication is a bridge of our internal experience, our inner truth, what's going on inside, to our external reality. And by the virtue of communication, we are communicating with another human being or AI, but we're communicating with let's say like a sentient being, right? And that act of communication is us transferring what is inside into the ears of the person that we are giving that information to. So really what I'm saying is communication is how do you translate what's going on inside of you into the conscious awareness of another person, and that person can receive you. And how good you are at communicating is how clearly that person can receive you. So it's like a radio transmitter, right? So if you are transmitting a certain tune, your song, and that person, can they hear the song that you are transmitting with the utmost clarity, as much clarity as possible? That is what determines the quality of your communication. And so that transmission can happen through your words, through your body language, through energy. The punchline is you've got something to say or something to express, and the person or persons in front of you can receive that transmission as clearly as possible so that they actually understand what you're saying the way you intended it to. That's what I mean by communication.
Hello, soul family. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. Before we dive back in, I want to share a free resource with you that's been transforming how leaders show up and speak their truth. If you've ever felt like there's a gap between the wisdom you hold inside and what actually comes out when you speak, if you found yourself freezing in high-stakes moments, editing your truth in real time, or leaving conversations thinking, that's not what I meant to say, then you'll want to watch my free masterclass, The Art of Articulation, How to Speak Your Truth Without Freezing, Hiding, or Performance. In this masterclass, I share the 3 core principles that help leaders move from performing to transmitting, so your words don't just inform, they land in people's bodies, in their souls. You'll understand why traditional communication training hasn't worked, what's actually happening in your nervous system when you freeze or edit yourself, and how to build the capacity to speak powerfully in any room. This is not about learning scripts or frameworks. It's about closing the gap between who you are and how you show up, so you can finally express your vision with the same clarity you feel it inside. If you're ready to reclaim your voice and speak from your center, then go to the show notes for the link to dive in. Now let's get back into the episode.
And dialogue is two-way, right? I communicate with you, and then you communicate with me. And then I communicate back with you, and then you communicate back with me. Then we are having a dialogue where you and I are communicating our internal worlds with each other. And as a result of that, you and I are in conversation, we're in communication, and we are having a dialogue. There's 2 of us transmitting information to one another. We're understanding each other. We are expanding our worldview. We're expanding our perspective. I understand how you feel. You understand how I feel. I see you. You see me. I hear you. You hear me, in an ideal world. So now that we've got that one clear, back to my point, which is modern life has really eroded our capacity to have meaningful dialogue. And what I mean by meaningful is that when you and I dialogue, when we are in communication, we are supporting each other's growth, each other's evolution, and we are evolving rather than devolving or engaging in toxicity and things that further disconnect us from ourselves, each other, God, source, universe. Okay. Now we've got the definitions out of the way. How is modern life eroding our capacity? Well, first of all, let's look at digital distraction. This one's pretty simple and straightforward. with the rise of social media, with the internet, I feel like like a dinosaur saying this. I'm a 90s kid, but with the rise of the internet, but also social media and just more and more ways that we are basically connection is getting productized and digitized, and it's just becoming easier and easier to access all these different people all around the world. It's creating, there's so many gifts to social media. There's so many gifts to this, globalization and digitization that we're going through. And at the same time, it has also created a massive distraction when it comes to human connection. And what I mean is this, like, how many times have you been at dinner and people, or you've seen this happen when you go to restaurants and observe other people, and they're just scrolling on their phones. They're having dinner, they're eating food, and they're looking at a screen. They're not looking at each other. They're not engaging with each other. They're on Instagram looking at someone else's life. I can't tell you how many times, I have a decent social media presence. And so I have had this happen multiple times where I am at a party and someone takes interest in me. We're having a conversation. They're like, "Oh my God, cool. What's your Instagram?" And I'll tell them what my Instagram is. And they will literally start to scroll and consume me when I'm right there in front of them. And I'm like, "Hello, we were having a conversation just now where you were looking me in the eyes and we were speaking to each other like two human beings. And now you're literally on your phone consuming my profile when I'm right in front of you can just ask me your questions. You can just talk to me. I'll tell you what's on there. I'll give you even better quality of what's on there." And so we are getting, I've talked about this in another episode where, one of the key takeaways from my 3 month sabbatical earlier this year for my business was understanding that I needed to go on a digital detox, and just further understanding that I needed to clean up my relationship with social media. The result of that is I'm off the apps. It's been about 5 months since I've even opened a social media app. I'm just not on there. I'm not on there for business. The only times I've touched social media is if I'm like signed up for a course and I need to go grab something, or if I need to urgently message somebody and I only have their handle just to get their phone, things like that. But basically, I just needed to go through a whole detox to actually really see how many hours of my day I was losing to being distracted, unfocused, just being taken away. And it's designed to be that way, right? Like, there are brilliant, some of the world's top engineers, psychologists, just experts have been hired to make social media as addictive, as compelling, as engaging as it can possibly be. Like, we are doomed if we think we can compete against some of the most brilliant minds in the world when it comes to reclaiming our focus by being on social media. And so I just noticed that when it comes to connection, I could be fully present having a dinner with a friend of mine and fully being immersed in the conversation and growing our connection through presence there. Or I could be like checking my phone every 30 minutes. And every time he or she goes to the bathroom, I'm looking at my phone again, and I'm getting like lost in like a mini Instagram vortex. And it just doesn't serve us, you know? I'm just putting it out there. Unless you can say, hand on your heart, that you're very focused on your soul's mission, and you have very clean and clear boundaries when it comes to social media, and you can say with your hand on your heart, no, I am not being distracted by social media right now, and every time I use it, it is with the utmost intention. If that's you, then disregard what I'm about to say. If it's not you, I will challenge you to start thinking about the ways that you allow yourself to be distracted all the time, and the ways that that is actually taking away from your ability and capacity to form deeper connections in your life. Just going to leave that one there because it's important. Another factor of our modern day life is just the accelerating pace of life. And again, it's all interconnected, right? Just as we get busier and there's more apps with delivery and everything is just on demand, on demand, on demand, even with the rise of AI, what happens is that we can do more things faster. And there is a blessing to that. Of course, it's great to be able to do more with less. And I'm not, poo-pooing on the benefits of having everything on demand. And at the same time, there is a cost to this, which is we begin to train our nervous systems that fast is better. That fast is normal. That go, go, go is the normal pace at which we want to operate. And that is going to affect our human connections. It's going to affect them. Think about it. Even small things like just the ability to 2x a voice note on WhatsApp means that you're now expecting somebody, like you don't have the patience to just listen at 1x. I don't know about you, but I find myself, I train myself to listen to things faster, and then I'm unlearning to listen to things slower because I'm realizing that I'm creating this unconscious expectation, or I was, it's obviously not unconscious anymore, of it's like, can you just talk faster? Can you just move? Okay, get to the point faster, right? And we're losing touch with what it actually means. For example, what would it mean to listen to this podcast episode on 1x? What would it mean to slow down and actually feel into the transmission of what I'm saying instead of just going and accelerating it so that you can get the information and go, 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 and then you're done? What are you really doing this for? Are you listening to this so that you can get a lot of information and you can do it really fast and you can just get in your brain and be done with it? Or are you tuning into this because something in your soul sparked your interest? You're feeling into, you're taking your time to feel into the words that I'm actually saying. And so there's a difference in quality when we communicate, even especially in the virtual world, for communicating and we're 2xing everything. It is going to compromise how we connect with each other. If we're listening to something really fast, it's going to compromise maybe the moments in between or the moments of silence where you could pick up on certain nuances that will allow you to understand the person better when you are in dialogue with them. There's also the element of physical separation, right? Like we're living, especially in the city, those living in cities, like we are living in boxes, like four walls. I'm on my own, the tribal, the way that, especially modern life, tribal life is no longer there. You don't even know who your neighbor is anymore, right? Like it used to be a time, or even in many places of the world, this still exists where you're in a village and you know who your neighbor is. And you know how, if you're playing loud music at night, you know that your neighbor next door has a 4-year-old daughter that he's trying to put to sleep, at 10 p.m. Like you're aware of that. And because you're in connection with that neighbor, you also have a shared level of mutual respect and kindness and consideration for each other, where you turn down the music at 10 p.m. And, similarly, if you're in, if you get locked out of your house, you can knock on his door and he'll help you out. And there's that sense of connection. And again, even going back to communication, this shared language that you have, that you're going to help each other and you can ask for help, which are all the beautiful elements. When you have open, clear, heart-based communication with someone else, you can ask for what you need very clearly and they can hear you because they feel you. Right? And so even on top of that, it's that loss of community spaces for authentic connection. Gosh, again, like one of the gifts of having such a hyper virtual world is that these days you can find a community for just about anything. And at the same time, can you though? Of all the communities that you're in, of all the WhatsApp groups I'm in, of all the former masterminds that I'm a part of or courses that I've purchased, how many community spaces do I actually feel safe showing up for and authentically connecting in? Not that many. There's lots on my phone. There's lots from my courses. But there's only a very small handful of community spaces where I feel I can show up and authentically connect with other humans, and where I feel like I can just express myself from my heart and be received in that in a community level. So just a few ways to contemplate, we have collectively created a society that hasn't been very spacious or friendly in terms of us having those deep, nurturing moments of human connection, and for us to be able to really, truly communicate with one another and understand one another. And what I have noticed is that in my own work, and in my own soul's mission to support leaders to communicate from their heart and to do so in a very embodied way and to share their story from that place, is that we've just collectively forgotten how to speak from the heart. And this has taken a huge emotional toll of just chronic miscommunication and chronic disconnection. And so let's dive into the root of disconnection. Why is this happening? Because There's a deeper issue here at hand. Problem isn't just how we communicate. It's where we're communicating from. We've been conditioned to disconnect from our bodies and emotions when speaking. I mean, even the examples that I share with you, just needing to constantly be showcasing the highlight reels of our lives and having everything be on demand, faster, go faster, communicate faster, talk more. And we are so just collectively conditioned to be in our mind and to be in our mental body that communication, I'm going to, give you an example. Communication looks something like this. Like you're talking really fast and it's really about the thoughts in my head, and I have to look at my notes to see what it is that I want to say next. And then and I also forget that other thing that I wanted to tell you. And and by the way, and right. And let me tell you the other thing that I spent hours and hours thinking about, and then I wrote out all my notes. Oh shit, I forgot to like talk about this other thing in my notes. Oh my god. Oh, can you see how exhausting that is? I had to like I have to, I brought myself up into my headspace for me to deliver that demo. And I'll walk you through what's happening now in my system. So right now I'm like, whoa, that was a lot of mental chatter. Ooh. So I'm breathing. And now I'm bringing my conscious awareness all the way. I'm distributing it all the way into my body, feeling all the way into my toes, just feeling into my womb, reconnecting to my heart, reconnecting to the reason why I desired to press record and talk to you about this topic. Right? And so as I'm doing this, what's happening is I'm reconnecting to my body, my physical body, and I'm also reconnecting to my emotional body. And to the best of my ability, as I'm speaking to you, I'm speaking from my heart, not from my mind, not from a script that I spent hours and hours thinking about and writing out and perfecting the words for. But I'm speaking to you from my body, from my emotions, or in this case, specifically from my heart, the emotional center, about something that I perceive to be an issue and what I believe we can do about it across the board. And what I found is that in my own journey, to be actually able to even speak from this place, to slow down and to even be in a space where I could be aware of what's going on in my body and speak from my heart and be aware of that in real time, that was a huge journey for me. I had to unlearn how we were taught to communicate. I had to, first of all, become aware of and then decondition a childhood of being taught to speak out whenever I felt emotional or shut down, right? Even when we look at patterns of communication that we learn as children, the very classic ones is it's not safe to speak up because if you're angry and you speak up, your parents will say, don't be a bad boy, don't be a bad girl, or they'll hit you, or whatever it is that your childhood consisted of. I know for me, anytime I had an emotional outburst, I got hit with a shoe actually. And whenever I was very emotional, I lived in a household where the reality was that it's like, oh yeah, you think you're bad? You're mad? Let me tell you about why I'm angry, right? And there was this like completely unconscious reaction to communicating where it was just two people speaking things at each other, yelling things at each other, and neither of those people were actually hearing what the other person had to say. And neither of those people were self-aware of their emotional state, or nor did they have the tools to self-regulate themselves and become aware of the thing that they were saying so that they could say it better. Yeah. So I have had decades at this point of unlearning the way that I was taught by my environment, by my caregivers, how to communicate and how to express myself. And then not only that, but I had to go through a whole other journey on how do I feel safe enough to live in my heart where I can speak from that place. That in itself was a deep, massive journey that I talk about often in my masterclass, which I'll share more about at the end of this episode. as well as in my programs where when we dive deeper into it, I talk more about in detail about this, that the journey from a lot of the reason why we speak from our heads, and also the root of so much miscommunication and inability to connect with someone else, even though you're speaking to each other, even if you're speaking to each other, you're not able to see or hear or feel one another, is because we are not speaking from our hearts. Think about it this way. Let's say, I'll give you an example. You're living with a partner or housemate, friend, and you're having an issue about the dishes. You don't have a dishwasher, so the dishes are starting to pile up. And for whatever reason, maybe you're busy. Life is lifing. Your partner does the dishes, including your dishes, four times in a row, right? And then that day, your partner has a really hard day at work. Something happens that really stresses them out, and you leave a dish in the sink. And let's say your partner, he looks at you and he's like, "I can't believe, what is wrong with you? Seriously? Is this another dish that you want me to wash?" Or either directly, hourly, will go into attack, into fight, or passive aggressively, which is another form of anger. Say something like, "Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, just another wish. There's another dish for me to wash. No problem." It's all violent communication. And you're sitting there like shocked because you had no idea that this person was harboring all this anger around having done the dishes a few times in a row. And you're like, "Oh," and now your butt hurt. And you're like, "Well, I took out the trash yesterday. What are you talking about?" And your partner's like, "Oh, really? You took out the trash? Well, what about last week when I took it out 3 times in a row? Like, what about that?" Right? And then you just start going at each other. And if we were to double click on that, what's actually happening? You two are not communicating. Full stop. You're not communicating with each other. Can you agree? Can we agree on that? But don't just stop there. Why are you not communicating with each other? Because underneath that, where you're not communicating, there's an unresolved emotional expression. You're feeling angry at something. But is it really about the dishes? Or is it that the two of you have been feeling disconnected for months now and you haven't made love in a month and your partner's resentful about that? So therefore, anything he does for you in addition to that is just like stacking up something that he's really resentful for, but has not had the courage to communicate with you yet. Is it that, or is it the dishes? Is it that you're going into defense mode because you do feel entitled to having taken out the garbage last week, and you feel entitled that he should be washing your dishes for you? Or is it that you grew up, having been abandoned by one of your caretakers, and now you're going into attack mode because you want to justify why you behave the way that you do because you don't want this person to leave you or to abandon you, or whatever story is playing out. So that is just one of the many, 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 many types of examples as to why people don't communicate with each other. And the actual example, whether it's washing the dishes, taking out the dog, putting the children to bed, whatever the story is, it's actually not as important as identifying that what we'll do as a collective species, what we'll do is, because of our own patterning, because of our own conditioning, because of our own past, instead of communicating from the heart and saying the thing you really, really want to say that's truly alive inside of you, we will develop coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms, and we'll use communication as a way for us to play that out, to play out that trauma, to play out those fears, to play out our defense mechanism. We'll use communication, because the truth of the matter is, for someone who's done their personal work and looked into, really is connected to themselves, is connected to the other person, and has a certain level of communication skill and understands the value of that, in that moment, what that partner could say is, "Hey, honey, I'm noticing that you've put a dish in a sink now. And, I just want to share with you what's alive in me right now is 3 times this week, I took care of the dishes. It would really mean a lot to me if this round you would be able to take, if you could do the dishes. And if not, like, can we set up a time to talk about the way that we can distribute house chores so it feels really good for the both of us?" And if the other person was communicating instead of just reacting, instead of being like, really? Well, what else do you want to say to me then, right? Or whatever defensive reaction is. They would say, oh my gosh, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you feel that way. I personally didn't realize and didn't feel like I was overworking. We were overworking with this stuff. I'd love to hear more about how you're feeling. Like, let's figure something out. Let's figure out a solution, right? That's connection. That's communication. That's heart-led communication. And you might be listening to this being like, well, that sounds great, but I don't think I'd ever have the words for that. And if that's your camp, then know that there is a journey that you get to take. This is a skill set. The same way that someone's like, oh, I don't know how to make 10K months. I don't know how to make 10K months. I don't know how to do it. Okay. It's a skill set. If you learn how to build a business, and if you learn how to market effectively and how to convert those, leads into sales, then 10K months are easy. But you got to learn the skills and you got to apply yourself and clean up whatever belief systems and stories that you're running around why you can't have, 10K months. So it's same thing with connection and communication. It is a skill set. And what I notice is that people don't communicate well because they're afraid of being vulnerable. And that's what keeps us speaking from our heads rather than our hearts, because our heads are a safe place. Your mind is safe. You've got it all worked out in your mind. You can see like, okay, he washed the dishes 3 times, but I took out the garbage 4 times. And here's all the dates when I did it. Okay, let me just work this out and I'm going to win this battle because the facts line up. Mwah! And it doesn't ever work that way. It's such a big reason why we miscommunicate with one another and we are disconnect, is because we come up with all these mental strategies and all these mental stories around why we're right or why this other person should feel a certain way, or like, look at all the data that proves that, I'm doing a great job, but we actually forget that 95% of decisions are actually based on emotion. 5% are on logic. When you are desiring to connect with another human being and dialogue with them in a way that's actually meaningful and effective, you've got to address the emotional body. We cannot emotionally bypass. We need to be in our heart. And the best way that we can address someone's emotional body is by feeling their emotions with them. It's by being in our heart and by communicating with them from our heart. At the root of most arguments, most disconnection, most miscommunication is someone who deeply wants to feel heard and understood. I'll give you an example, something that my partner does so beautifully. He's very attuned, having had 2 daughters and just super, super, super attuned to the female psyche and emotional body. And there's been times where I'm like, God, I'm feeling a lot of anger at you for this thing. Because I'm telling myself a story. My hallucination is that you're doing this because, you don't care about me. Again, notice the language. I'm taking responsibility. I'm not putting it on someone else. And he'll just pause and he'll say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. That must really suck. And even though the actual thing I'm arguing about isn't something he agrees with, he's not like, oh yeah, you're right about that. Just the act of him seeing and feeling me calms me down. And I see this with team members, with clients, with my friendships, with intimate relationship, family. That so many times when we are communicating and it's going into the territory of arguing, or like someone's like aggressively trying to say something to you, underneath that is a desire to just be seen and met in their emotional state and in their hurt. And when you can meet them in their hurt, it opens up the door for a deeper, better conversation. But we don't do that because we're afraid. We're afraid to be vulnerable, because to be in our heart means to be vulnerable. I remember the first time I truly spoke from my heart. I literally remember it was April 2022. And no, I've been in the communication game for over a decade. So you'd be surprised. It was only 3 years ago. And I was at an authentic leadership event. And I remember they gave us 3 minutes to speak about a topic that could not be pre-planned. So they gave us a topic and we had to speak basically from our hearts. And I remember when I opened my mouth, I just started crying. I started crying, not because of the actual story that I was telling. It wasn't that it was a sad story, but because I was so afraid to be seen by a group of people in my rawness, in my vulnerability. I was so afraid that if I actually said what I wanted to say, not what I planned to say, not what I scripted out, not what I safely, like, in the comfort of my own office scripted out that I would say, but to say something ad hoc in the moment and have it be a vulnerable topic about my life. I burst into tears because I didn't know how to speak and be seen in my raw state of authentic expression. It was too vulnerable. I was afraid that if I spoke what I really wanted to say, I would be judged for it. I would be shut down. I would be made fun of, you know? So much conditioning came up. And I remember thinking, wow, to speak from my heart is going to be it's it's art. It's art to be able to actually stand in front of these people and to very imperfectly share a story in real time. The truth of what is in my heart is so freaking scary that I'd rather go into my head and pull up from the archives one of my, I know I can tell the story and draw out people's emotions. Like, if I just tell one of these stories, I know I'm going to get a reaction out of people, but that's manipulation. That's control. That's me going to my head and telling a story because I know it will get people's approval, because I've studied the psychology of it, because I've, tested and trialed it in my funnel. But what would it feel like to just speak what's alive for me so imperfectly right now? Even to give you an example of this in real time, right now, as I'm speaking these words, I think to myself, gosh, am I taking too long to explain this? Is you who's listening, are you going to understand me? Are you going to get what I'm saying? Am I going to have time to like say everything I want to say just in one episode? The answer is no, by the way. um, am I, what if I'm just speaking for an hour and it's just a bunch of jibber jabber and people don't get me? Those are things that are alive in my heart as I speak. And at the same time, I know that when I speak from this place, when I speak from this frequency, when I am in my body connected to my soul, what I say is a transmission, and I can trust that. I can lean back into that. And that has been a really big journey for me, because it is so much safer and so much easier for me to just go into a huddle with an AI tool and, ask it to like exactly map out every single word that I want to say today so that it perfectly dovetails into my funnel, and then just read from that script. That would be quote unquote easier, and it would be safer than putting my heart on the line and expressing myself and being like, oh, I might mess up my words. Oh shoot, I didn't use the right word. Oh God, now I'm going too long, and now I'm not structured, or I'm not as structured as I was I wanted to be, and blah, 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 and story. So to summarize this part is that the root of our collective disconnection from each other and our miscommunication, it's not just about how we communicate, it's where we're communicating from. When we are communicating from the safety of our heads and the conditioning that we have been subjected to in more modern society, that has us speaking faster, just like going faster. We have all these tools and resources to just kind of like pump out content. What we're losing is the quality of the communication, where less things can be said with more depth. And when we speak, there is this feeling behind the words that we say. There's this quote I really love. One of my mentors said this to me, and I would tell you who it is, but I forgot who it is. I remember writing down the quote and not forgetting it, which is that everything I do will bear the mark of consciousness in which I do it. And as I grow older and I evolve more and my emotional maturity deepens, I just keep coming back to this quote. It's not about what I do, it's about how I do it. And the how is the mark of consciousness in which I do it. So when I speak to somebody and I'm in my heart, that will elicit a different response from them than if I were to speak to them, at them, from my head, disconnected from my body, disconnected from my emotions. It's going to get a completely different, and dare I say, catastrophic result. Because even when I think back to my childhood and I think back to the way that my mother and my stepfather used to fight, what I see is two human beings completely disconnected from themselves and each other in that moment. And all they're doing is they're taking their story, their mentally based story of, look at me, look at my abandonment wounds. Why won't you fix it for me? Like, behind the lines, between the lines of, why didn't you do the dishes today? Like, I've done them 3 times in a row. Like, behind those words, what I'm actually hearing is, why won't you look at me? I am tired of being ignored. This is how I grew up. Stop abandoning me. And underneath that, what I see is a deeper rooted pattern of, I abandon myself. I don't speak up for myself. I don't set boundaries. I say yes when I mean no. Why won't you do this for me? Why won't you give me the love that I need because I'm not giving it to myself? Why won't you respect my boundaries because I don't put up my own boundaries? Why won't you not do this because I'm too afraid to say no? Because if I say no, then you won't love me. That's what's actually happening underneath. And underneath that is a wounded child that just wants to be loved and to be seen and to be heard in their hurt. Just like a little 5-year-old who throws a tantrum. It's like, okay, it's not about the toy. It's like, come here, baby. Let me just give you a hug. I love you. I'm sorry you're feeling that way. I'm so sorry. And most of us have not had that level of nurturing and conscious parenting in our lives growing up. So we grew up carrying around these deeply wounded children, and then fight with each other and hurl shit at each other and don't know how to communicate. And therefore it's just like reacting. There is a cost to this disconnection. And it is important to recognize that there are ripple effects to communication disconnection. I'll list some. In relationships, it looks like the slow erosion of intimacy. Have you ever been in or observed someone being in an intimate relationship where these two people they love each other, but they don't talk to each other? How many, I can think of so many people who have parents, even when I think about my clients and they share with me the way that they grew up and the way their parents related to each other. It's like, we lived in the same house, but they didn't really communicate. My father was passive aggressive. My mother just would scream at him and he would take it, and then he would go off and, cheat. There's all of these stories of the ways that instead of saying, honey, I'm feeling really crunchy. I gotta tell you something. I'm starting to feel attracted to this woman in my workplace today. Lately, I've been feeling that way. I'm saying this to you because I love you so much and I value our marriage, and I am noticing myself feeling attracted to someone, and I wonder what that could mean. Like, can we explore like why I'm feeling this disconnection from you? Because I don't want to cheat on you and I don't want to betray your trust, but I do want to address what's going on inside of me right now. God, that takes a lot of courage. It takes courage to be seen in the imperfection of you, to be seen in the, wow, that's really vulnerable to share that you're having fantasies about someone else when you're in relationship with me. And most people, we, number one, don't feel vulnerable sharing the truth of our heart because we're too afraid that it will mean that the person will reject us, will abandon us, will push us away. And you know what? Unfortunately, sometimes that is the case, because the second element of this factor is that the other person needs to have the capacity and the willingness to see someone in their vulnerability and hold space for that. Because it's not just being like, honey, I'm having fantasies about another woman. I want to talk about it. Can we talk about it? So I don't want to take any kind of actions that would betray you. But then if that woman says, how dare you? What is wrong with you? I hate you, because of her own abandonment wounds, then what that creates is a reality. Well, that man will shut down. He will shut down his heart, and he will be too afraid to ever speak his truth again because he doesn't want to get yelled at. He doesn't want to get punished. What it would take for that man to further open up is the woman to meet him and say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. That must be so vulnerable for you. That must be so edgy. I'd love to talk about it because, I desire to have a monogamous relationship with you. So for us to keep that, let's talk about what's going on. And that will open up a deeper conversation around their intimacy, around the ways that maybe he's not feeling appreciated as a man, a conversation around the ways that she would desire to receive more from him as a woman. And that will actually open up the space for productive, constructive conversation where the two of them can become more intimate, can get closer together. But as you can see and hear between the lines, to be able to have the courage to speak up is skill set number one. And also to be the kind of person that can receive someone in their vulnerability is skill set number two. Both important to have clean and clear heart-led communication, because someone is not going to feel safe. It does take an act of courage to feel safe speaking from your heart. And at the same time, it also takes an act of courage to feel safe receiving someone in their uncomfortable communication, even if it's very uncomfortable and edgy for you. So that's one way that it's affecting us. Another one is it's in leadership. Let's talk about business, right? The inability to inspire genuine buy-in. How many times, and I've experienced this so many times when I'm coaching clients, and you have team members where it doesn't really matter how much you're paying someone. Well, of course, as long as it's, you're meeting minimum wage requirements, but it's not so much about the money that you're paying a team member as much as it is their desire to be there. When you're a leader, are you able to communicate and articulate what your mission is to the people who are there? Because if someone's only there to clock in their hours and just do their job and then call it a day, and they don't care about your vision, or they don't understand it because you haven't clearly communicated it, then all it's going to be is a job to them. And there's only going to be a certain level of performance you'll ever receive from that person. I don't know about you, but as an entrepreneur, I can tell you that when I am lit up and passionate about my mission, I'm not even thinking about the amount of hours I'm working. I'm not thinking about the money. I'm thinking about how passionate I am about the creative process of what I'm building. And I'm so lit up and so oh my God, I love this, that I'll put in the extra hours. I'll work late, and I won't even feel the effects of that because I'm so in the flow. I'm so in my zone of genius that I just love what I do. And it's the same thing also if you're hiring somebody and they're working for you. It's the same thing. Do they get it? Did you communicate with them? Another way that this can affect us is in personal fulfillment. So, it's that gap between our inner wisdom and our outer expression. I can tell you, by all of the incredible entrepreneurs I worked with, you can have all the money that you want, all the visibility that you want, and be influencing, impacting hundreds of people, thousands of people around the world. But there is no agony greater than the desire to speak your truth and just being like, I can't say it. You can have millions of followers, but if you're showing up for those followers and you feel like you need to pretend to be a version of yourself, even though you've outgrown that version, that's painful. It's painful to be like, this is my truth and I can't speak it because of my fears of being judged. It's painful to run a company where you need to show up as some perfected, polished version of yourself, and you're human. You can't be vulnerable with your team, with your partners, because you need to keep up some sort of facade, because you're not able to communicate the truth of your heart, because you don't have the courage to say, actually, you know what? I'm going through a really hard time right now, and it's making me a little sloppy in my leadership. I apologize for that. I know I haven't been showing up the way that I would desire to show up. It's because I'm going through these personal things, and I'm sorry. Classic is, I'm sorry, I'm not able to lead the company the way that I can. I'm going through a divorce right now. It's painful. I'm feeling so much shame, and it's affecting my ability to work. And that will be so much more effective than lashing out at your team members and screaming at them because of all of the anger that you feel inside at your, soon to be ex-wife or husband. And you're so angry at them. And instead of just speaking your truth and processing that, then it becomes a projection into other areas of your life. That doesn't work. We want to be able to bridge the gap between our inner wisdom and our outer expression. It is vital. It is food. It is nutrition to our soul to be able to authentically express ourselves in the truth of who we are in this present moment as we are, imperfectly. It is food to our soul to be able to express ourselves as we are in the now moment and to be received in that expression. And that requires us to both have the courage and the skill set to learn how to express ourselves from our heart, and to also have the grit and the strength and the willingness to accept if we can't be received in that expression. Just because we're incredible communicators speaking from our heart does not mean everyone we're speaking to, communicating with, has the bandwidth capacity to receive us. And that's the dilemma, right? When I work with clients and they're like, yeah, but I want to speak my truth, but I'm afraid I'm going to get bullied, or people are not going to accept me, or they're going to judge me. And the truth of the matter is, some people will. When you are in your true, authentic expression, yes, There will be people that do not like what you say because you will remind them of their own way of not speaking up for themselves, because your truth will trigger someone else's wounds. It's inevitable. It will happen, but it will also happen by you keeping yourself in a box. The difference is that when you speak your authentic truth, you actually are able to attract the people, situations, and opportunities that you are an energetic match for. That's the difference. I can guarantee you, one way or another, you're going to piss people off. One way or another, you're going to have some reactive person who does not know how to authentically communicate, who can't hold themselves in communication, who's going to be reactive. Like, that's going to happen. But how you lead yourself through the process, that's what makes a difference. Because the truth of the matter is, this is a collective challenge we're all facing. This is a big thing in the collective. And so it's not as simple as, oh, I'm going to work on myself and I'm going to work on clear heart-based communication, and then everything will be fine from there, because you're still going to need to deal with difficult people who don't get it yet or who are still learning how to do it. Or if you're in a partnership and you're working on your heart-led communication, you also need your partner to be doing some of the work with you, because otherwise you're going to evolve into a level of communication. And if they're still being reactive with you, it's not going to work for you anymore. So it is a two-way street. And that's why we all need to rise together in this process. It's not enough to only to be the best communicator in the room, but it's also important to learn how to both dialogue and facilitate dialogue and support other people in how they're communicating as well. That's the missing piece. And in my work, as I teach it, I do have, a process for heart-based communication. And we're not able to go into the specific framework of that in this episode. Obviously, that's going to be within the context of my programs. However, what a key takeaway for you here is really about heart-led, heart-based communication is the bridge between your inner wisdom and your outer expression. It's the bridge. And when you're able to build that bridge strong, you will find that when you express yourself, you will get very different reactions than what you're probably getting now. And even if you're like, I'm already good, Celinne, and if you've made it far enough into this episode, clearly there's something in here for you. But this is just either about building the skill or refining the skill that you already have. But know that it's important, not just for yourself and your own success, but for our success, like as a collective. What I realize is that the better I get at communicating, the more people can understand me. I remember once upon a time getting frustrated with my marketing and my messaging and being like, I'm speaking from my heart. Why aren't people getting what I'm selling? Why aren't they understanding it? Why don't you get it? And I realized it's because it's not just about me having the courage and the confidence and the words to speak from my heart. That's not the entire equation. The other half of the equation is being clear and getting present with who it is that I'm desiring this communication to reach. In business, it would be my, ideal client avatar. In intimate relationship, it would be my boyfriend. In friendships, it'd be my friend. Family, it'd be my mother, my father, my cousin, my aunt. But each one of these people have different ways that they receive communication. So step number one is get out of your head and get into your heart and speak from your heart from an embodied space. That's already going to resolve a lot. Just that step is already going to clear up a lot of miscommunication. You're going to, even in the examples I've given you, when you speak from that place of like, okay, here's what I want to communicate. Here's what's happening in my heart. Step number two is really taking ownership for your own experience. It's about saying like, my story, my hallucination, my experience of what's going on right now is this. Step three is really to get super aware of the person who's in front of you and recognize where they're at in their life, what their limitations are. A very silly example of this is the way that if you're trying to ask a 5-year-old to clean up after herself, it's going to look very differently than if you're asking a 45-year-old man to clean up after himself. It's two different conversations. If you try to talk to the 5-year-old girl the way you would speak to the 45-year-old man, that 5-year-old girl is not going to get what you're saying. And if you try to speak to the 45-year-old man like you would talk to the 5-year-old girl, he's going to feel really offended and condescended for good reason. So you're going to need to be able to tailor your communication to be delivered to the person that you're looking to reach. That's your job as well. And step 4 is to be able to receive the person's response slash reaction with acceptance of what they're experiencing in their reality. And what I mean by that is this: just because you're speaking, and I've said this before, but just for the sake of repetition, just because you're speaking from your heart and you're considering the other person and you're taking responsibility for your reality does not mean that other person has an obligation to be like, oh, you're right, I fully receive you, I fully hear you. No, because they have their own limitations, they have their own journey, they have their own path. And if we could all be effective, efficient, heart-based communicators, I would not be recording this podcast. I'm recording this podcast because there's a problem in the collective. And this is the way that I hope to contribute to the solution of that problem. But know that people don't own it to you to be in dialogue, meaningful dialogue with you. People are stuck in their own shit. And ideally, in an ideal world, you can inspire someone and you can invite them into higher, cleaner, clearer, heart-based dialogue through the example of you doing that for them, through actions, by practicing what you preach. You can inspire and invite someone to meet you there, but they are not always going to be able to meet you there. And it's not just because they don't want to, or because, they suck, or because they're dumb. It's because sometimes they just don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the capacity. They don't have the skill set. They don't have the awareness that there's a better way to communicate, because all they've ever been used to is toxic communication. I remember in my own evolution, I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know conscious communication, heart-based, was a thing, because I grew up with toxic communication. So all that I knew existed was that, until I was able to open my eyes that there was something bigger. And how was I able to open my eyes? Because there were examples of people in my life who spoke to me differently than the way I grew up. People in my life, I was lucky, blessed to have humans in my life that I met who spoke with me in kindness and compassion, who took the time to explain things to me, who took the time to model for me what it looked and felt like when they spoke to me from their heart instead of rattling off some story from their head. And the more I saw that and the more I experienced it in my body, the more I was like, wow, I want to learn how to speak like that. I want to learn how to communicate like that, because not only does it feel better in my body, but it allows me to have greater connection and intimacy with the person I'm communicating with. It opens the door for dialogue so that I can expand my perspective and I can grow as a human being. And not only that, it is so much more efficient than the alternative, because miscommunication and disconnection equals, to me, from like my analytical binary brain, it is so much time, energy, resources wasted down the drain. Heart-led communication is so much more effective. I can't tell you, I can literally probably put dollar signs on it. The thousands of dollars that I have lost as a result of miscommunication, feeling disconnected from the other person because I couldn't explain to them what I really wanted. I couldn't hold a conversation that could have prevented a big conflict from happening, and then lost all this time and all of this money got lost, like blah, 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 blah. So many times my inability to drop into my heart, to be in my body, to communicate from that deeper place, it has cost me tens of thousands of dollars. And without even the financial bit, it has cost me relationships. It has cost me emotional, it has cost me life force energy. It's exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting to miscommunicate with somebody, and to be disconnected from somebody that you love is exhausting. And I'm sure you can feel me. Do you have someone in your life, they're like, I love this person so much, but I cannot get through them? Or have you had to give up relationships in your life because as much as you care about the person, as much as you love that person, you just cannot seem to communicate with each other and you cannot understand each other? It's freaking painful. And sometimes it's inevitable and sometimes it's part of our path. And at the same time, I do believe that there are so many relationships that can be salvaged. There's so much money that can be made. There's so much reparation that can be done if we just take it upon ourselves to truly learn the art of embodied communication and communicate better with each other. So, this is what I want to leave you with, really, is this deeper contemplation. First of all, it's this awareness. Do you agree? I mean, maybe you don't, maybe you do. But do you see what I'm saying? When you look around, modern society, can you see the ways that we are distracting ourselves from deeper human connection? The ways that in our day to day, whether it's, bringing out our phone while we're eating or scrolling at night instead of spending quality time with your partner or children, what are some of the ways that you can see yourself disconnecting and miscommunicating in your day to day with the people that you love, as well as the people that you don't yet love because maybe you don't know them, depending on where you stand, right? So, a deeper reflection here on how is this playing out in your life, and an invitation to reflect on what are the ways that you can improve your heart-led communication. I mean, I'm sitting here, look, this is my work. This is the life, the fuel that drives my mission. And even then, I'm still like, okay, I need to get better here. Oof, I was not in my heart there. I could have definitely done better. Like, I'm constantly revisiting and tweaking and adjusting and contemplating on how can I be an even better communicator? How can I connect with this person even more in this moment? I am super imperfect at this, and it is, my profession. So given that, my suspicion is that there is room for improvement for you. So that's another contemplation I want to invite you into is, what could that be for you? What does it look like for you to become a more heart-led communicator? Whether it looks like literally going from your head into your heart, or having the courage to speak up even when you're afraid that you're vulnerable, or maybe it looks like getting better at receiving other people in their courageous communication and not being triggered and not reacting at them so that they can feel like it's safe for them to open themselves up to you, even in their hard truths. There's so many things that we get to work on here. And, the third piece that I want you to take away and really contemplate on is, and I'm going to sound cheesy, it's how can you make the world a better place by contributing to the solution in your unique way? What does that look like for you? For me, it looks like this podcast. It might not look like a whole podcast for you. It might just look like making the commitment to get better at communicating with your children from now on. It could be as simple as that. But is there a commitment that you can make for you to improve the way that you show up and the way that you communicate in your day to day, just based off of this conversation that we had today, right? So there's a few things that I want you to invite you into. Just know there is a whole framework for embodied communication that I teach that has transformed thousands of lives, starting with my own, as you can clearly hear. And I would love to teach you this framework for those of you who want to go deeper in it, but not in this episode, right? As you can see, there's a lot of nuances here. It's deep. And so there's a couple options that I'd love to leave you here with. The first one is you can join. I do have a free masterclass where I reveal the specific principles around how to start your journey with heart-led embodied communication. And so I have given you these broad stroke principles here today, but in this masterclass, what you'll find to be super, super valuable is that I'm going to go really into the nitty gritty of, okay, so here's a few takeaways that you can literally go take home and start practicing for you to see these immediate improvements in your heart-based communication. So it's absolute gold. It's called the Art of Embodied Transmission. And so that's going to be linked in the show notes. I highly recommend, if you're like resonating with this episode, make sure even now as you're listening, scroll into the show notes, click on the link, sign up for this masterclass. It's completely free. And as with anything I design, as you know, with this podcast episode, whether it's free or whether it's paid, you're getting 100% of me. What changes is the accessibility and the depths of detail and the depth that we can go into. But know that the next step with this masterclass, you're just going to get some really incredible tools that you can go and implement to make those tangible changes in your life today. And if what we've discussed resonates further with you, there are additional resources that I have, paid products that I have. This includes my Heartfire workshop, and I do have an articulate program at the time of this recording. I don't know yet where it's live, so you're going to need to look at my show notes to get the details of my group program, where it is a live container where I'm going to be going really deep on how the journey of how you can do this and how you yourself can transform into a heart-led communicator and leader in all areas of your life. So all of that information, if you want to take this exploration further, all of that is located in the show notes. And you can also DM me on Instagram at CelinneDaCosta.com. What am I saying? At Celinne DaCosta, for you to learn more information. I would like, if this episode is up your alley, then I have no doubt that you would find incredible value in either my masterclass or one of my paid programs, to go really deeper into this work, because it's so important and it will change the world. And I'm not just saying that facetiously. So anyways, the link is all in the show notes. So make sure you check that out. So to close this out, the power of authentic communication. It makes such a difference. We are living in a world where human connection is being forgotten, where everybody's talking, but not enough people are listening. And we're speaking, but we're not necessarily communicating. And so the revolution that I'm inviting into in this episode, in my work, is what if there is a way for us to communicate that paves the way for deep intimacy, deep connection, deep fulfillment, and evolution, not just of the self, but of the collective. Because when we learn how to connect with ourselves, connect with each other, and as a result, we get to connect to God, source, universe. Who we become are people who are connected to our heart, and we can express our truth from a loving place so that we can create a reality where we live in love and truth. And communication, heart-led communication, is one of the core tools that will bridge that gap. And so at whatever capacity in which you can prioritize this and work and really do the personal work, what it takes to clear out what's been keeping you from speaking your truth, what's been keeping you stuck. Why are you so fearful of being vulnerable? It takes personal work to clear that out through your nervous system. And at the same time, developing the skill set to communicate clearly, effectively, from the heart, and in consideration of the person or people you're communicating with. It's going to change the game for you. It's going to change the game for you in your intimate relationships. It's going to change the game for you in your work as a leader. And it's going to change the game for you in terms of your personal fulfillment. Because let me tell you, it is so damn satisfying to feel something in your heart, to move, to feel your soul stirring within the depths of your heart, and to have the courage and skill set to speak your authentic soul expression into existence. That moves mountains. It stirs other people's souls. It inspires them to speak their authentic expression. So don't underestimate the power that your authentic communication has on this world. It may seem like just a few words or podcast or post or just a conversation behind closed doors, but you're making such a difference by choosing your authentic expression in consideration to the higher good of all, to put it bluntly. That's the simple version. Simple, not simple, right? So take that with you. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for listening, making it through the end. And as always, if there's anything that really strikes you from today's episode, don't be shy, screenshot it. Let me know what I said that really touched you. Tag me on Instagram. My team will be passing forward anyone's comments to me. So I really love hearing from you. I really love hearing from you and the ways that this work touched you, because, well, surprise, surprise, when I hear you communicate with me, then it inspires me to create more for you in a way that will really support you. So that being said, thank you so much for listening in today, and I will see you in the next one. Mwah. Thank you, beautiful humans, for tuning into today's episode of It's Not What You Think. If you loved what you received today, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, as it helps us reach even more amazing listeners like you. If we aren't already connected on social media, come receive even more tips and inspiration by following me on Instagram at Celinne DaCosta, or visiting my website at CelinneDaCosta.com. After listening to this episode, I invite you to take a few moments to reflect. What stood out to you? What were your key takeaways or breakthroughs? And if there was one action step you could take from this, what would it be? Thank you again for joining me on this journey. I'm sending you so much love, and I can't wait to connect in the next episode. Until then, keep sharing your unique gifts and living out your most magical life.